to Algebra 2, Lesson 2-3. Factored form of quadratic function. Let's look at example 2. Relate factors to zeros of a function. The graph shows a function defined by y equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. How do the zeros of the function relate to the factors of the expression x squared plus 2x minus 8? So we want to figure out the zeros of the function from the graph, which is right there, negative 4, 0, 2, 0. Those are the zeros, right? So in other words, if you don't remember what zeros are where your graph meets the x-axis, where the y value is 0. Okay, so zeros of the function is when your function is equal to 0, but your function is represented by your range. So your range values are y here, right? So zeros of the function is when y is equal to 0, which by definition are the x-intercepts. Yeah, so another word for x-intercepts would be zeros of the functions. They're the same thing. Okay, so this is the graph. We already know that the zeros are negative 4 and 2. By just looking at it, right? But how are they related to the factors? So let's change our standard form into a factored form. So we already did that in example 1. You should know how to factor them out and how to change standard form to factors. So we talked about how the two numbers m and n are factors of negative 8, the last constant term, and will be add up to the second term here, positive 2. So we have many factors, right? For 8, 1 and 8, 2 and 4, but either one has to be negative. So positive 4 and negative 2 will be multiplied to make negative 8, and if they are added up, they would be positive 2. So it's going to be x plus 4 and x minus 2 in the factored form. And you see that the zeros of the functions are actually related with the factored form, right? So when we solve for the zeros from the factored form, it's really easy because when y is equal to 0, then you have x plus 4 times x minus 2 is equal to 0, and you know that x is equal to negative 4 and positive 2. Those are exactly our zeros of the function, negative 4 and positive 2. So factors of the quadratic functions are related to the zeros of the function. That's why they're related. So let's look at try number 2. The graph shows the function y equals x squared minus 9x plus 20. Identify the zeros of the function. How do zeros relate to the factors of x squared minus 9x plus 20? So at the end, you want to write something like this. In the example 2, the factors x plus 4, x minus 2 are related to the zeros x equals negative 4 and x equals 2 because each of the zeros make one of the factors 0. So you want to say something similar for this one as well. So pause the video and see if you can figure out your own sentence. Okay, are we ready? So first of all, you have to figure out the factors, right? So you can solve it algebraically to be exact. But if you look at the graph, you'll see that the zeros of the functions would be 4 and 5. So you want to see if the factored form would have something to do with that, right? So if you factor it out, you would get something like x minus 4 times x minus 5. And then if you multiply them, it's positive 20. If you add them, it's negative 9. So you want to say something that relates the factors and the zeros. So you can look at your example and see how they worded it and say the same thing, right? The factors x minus 4 and x minus 5 are related to the zeros x equals 4 and x equals 5, since each value of x makes one of the factors 0. So that's how they're related. Okay. So that was example 2. Let's think about the concept here. So we have something called zero product property. The zero product property states that if a product of real number factors is 0, then at least one of the factors must be 0, right? In the case of two factors, if A times B is 0, then either A or B is 0 or both of them are zeros, right? So this is the zero product property. And it makes sense. It's not really hard to remember this. So in using this property, you can rewrite the equation so it's an expression equal to 0, like this, to figure out the zeros. So you factor out and solve for the zeros. Okay, we'll really dive into this property in the next example in the next video.